So, Chapter 9. Chapter 9. Removing the limits. So, the purpose of the central bank is to remove the limits on credit expansion. Usually, the central bank is government-owned, or historically it was government-owned, but later on, when everybody understood that when the government owns the bank, things don't work well and properly, central banks became to be independent. And independence is only in name. Central banks are never independent. Central banks are always dependent by the government. Central banks are created with laws by the government. The government at any point in time can change the law. The most bankers, central bank board of directors or whoever is managing the central bank are usually appointed by the government itself, which simply means that at any point in time, if these guys, meaning the central bank, does not serve the government will replace them and put people who will serve the government. So, the first goal or purpose, let's see, goals will be of the central bank to finance government deficits. This is the same as government financing. So this is the first priority of the central bank. And the second priority is finance / bailout commercial banks. Most of the time the central bank is the commercial banks, by the commercial banks, for the commercial banks, so it is a servant of the commercial bank. It's usually commercial banks get together to establish their own central bank, which will regulate everybody. What the regulation is focused on removing the limits of credit expansion. In other words, regulation will be first and foremost on making commercial banks expand together uniformly. So if they all grow at 10%, there will not be leakage from one bank to another. They can grow together safely, okay? So that's what the central bank. The central bank is there not to allow one bank to grow at 5% and another one to grow at 45%. That doesn't work. That's kind of like the free market and cannot be allowed. That's what the central bank is about, okay? Of course, one of the major functions of the central bank is to monopolize printing of money and to remove any competing currencies. Another function of the central bank is to, if they can and when they can, or as soon as they can, to demonetize gold. The word demonetize comes from the word moneta, which means money. To demonetize means to remove as functioning from money. So to demonetize gold means that the central bank will do everything in its power to remove gold from functioning as money. They may probably outlaw it, or they may just have a massive propaganda just telling, well, gold is no good, or it's ancient money, or that only tribes and uncivilized people use gold. You know, they'll tell whatever story will work for the people to not use gold, because bankers, both central and commercial, don't like gold. Gold is a massive weapon against both of them. It works against their interest. It works against their profits, okay? So, as I said, bankers hate gold. But, equally important, gold also prevents or limits commercial bank or central bank financing of the government. So, governments also hate gold. Governments just want paper money so that they can just print as much as they want to print. You want to print $1 billion? Fine. You want to print $1 trillion? Fine. No problem. So, when the crisis of, we call this global financial crisis of 2008 came, the balance sheet of the central bank was about 1 trillion. And that will be 1 trillion balance sheet, which was accumulated in a matter of 100 years. The Federal Reserve was established in 1913, so in about 95 years of history, they had 9 trillion. Then the second trillion, they printed in 3 months to bail out the banks. So here it's 95 years. Now, other less important and very low priority goals, other low priority goals for the central bank are, and they say, oh, we always fight inflation. So, inflation meaning low inflation. So banks want or try to keep inflation low as possible, while they're financing the government and taking care of the commercial banks. In other words, these are high priority, these are low priority. Again, very high inflation is in general damaging for the banking system, is in general damaging for the government. And if you remember, high inflation actually causes a whole bunch of problems, especially when demand for money falls. So, actually, a relatively higher priority is to keep demand for money up. In other words, they want to keep a relatively good priority. Now, here is confidence in money. That's a very high priority. If you got the confidence in money, you can do these things. Okay? Confidence in money is relatively high. The next one is confidence in the banking system overall. They want to maintain confidence in the banking system. They always say the banking system is strong, the banking system is profitable, the banking system is good, there are no problems, everything's okay. So they'll keep saying all of those things all the time. And most of the time it will not be true. Now the example is about the Italian banking system, which is totally and completely bankrupt, where most of the banks are actually insolvent. They've accumulated 360 billion euros, $60 billion of bad debts, which they can't possibly pay, okay? Which is a huge amount of their overall credits. But nevertheless, they keep saying the same old thing, that the banking system is strong, that they are recovering from profitability, and whatever else. And the next one is stable currency. Stable don't want the exchange rate relative to other currencies to change too much. For example, the Chinese Central Bank, it's called PBOC, People's Bank of China, is trying to maintain a very or relatively stable exchange rate against the dollar. And if the Chinese currency starts going up, they'll push it a little bit down, okay, to reduce the movement. And if the Chinese currency starts going down, they'll try to drive it back up. Here's a simple picture. This is what the Chinese currency would like to do. Okay, this is on the free market, that's what it would do. And the Chinese central bank says, oh no, we're not going to allow such a big rise. And we're not going to allow such a big fall. We're going to keep it relatively stable. So instead of the free market fluctuation, which will be very high and very destabilizing, they prefer to have a relatively low fluctuation. So when we say stable currency, we mean stable exchange rate to relative to other major currencies. In other words, what's happening, the local currency to the Thai baht doesn't matter. It matters what happens to the local currency to the dollar, to the euro, to the yen, to the British pounds. These are the global major currencies of the world. So these are what the central banks typically tell us they want to do. This is what they typically try to do. But whenever there is a problem here, any of these will be always sacrificed to finance the government. So, if it means inflation will rise to finance the government, that's okay. If it means confidence in the money may be lost, that's okay. The government is always higher priority. If it means it will destabilize currency, that's okay. Alright? So, these are desires. And these are, okay, let's write it out. Desire. This is what they want. And these are imperative.